24 hours after she boarded a bus to Florida, she was dead. She thought she was visiting the man of her dreams, a uniformed sheriff who promised her safety, love, and a fresh start. Instead, she walked straight into a nightmare she could never escape. Tonight, we uncover the shocking case of a young woman's final journey, a secret that pushed a man sworn to protect into committing the unthinkable. Stay with me, because the truth will chill you more than the crime itself. You're watching Dark Motives, where we dive deep into the most twisted and unbelievable true crime cases. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. Trust me, what you're about to hear will stay with you long after the video ends. And before we continue, drop a comment below and let me know. Where in the world are you watching this from? I love seeing how far these stories travel, and I'll be replying to as many of you as I can. Now, let's step into the chilling story of a woman's final day alive, the day she thought she was meeting the love of her life, only to find herself face to face with a deadly secret. She was only 23, full of life and filled with dreams of something better. Friends described her as sweet, trusting, and always quick to believe in the good of people. She grew up in a small town where everybody knew everyone's business, and for years she felt trapped, like life was passing her by while she stayed in the same place. That's when she met him. Online at first, their conversations stretched late into the night. He wasn't just anyone. He was a sheriff in Florida, a man in uniform, someone she thought represented safety, discipline, and strength. To her, he seemed like the kind of man who could protect her from everything she feared in the world. She would tell her friends, "He's different. He understands me. He's serious about me." And when he finally invited her to visit him in Florida, she didn't hesitate. She packed a small bag, promised her family she'd call when she arrived, and stepped onto that bus with hope in her eyes. She thought this trip was the start of her forever, but in reality, it was the beginning of her end. On the surface, he was everything she thought she wanted. A decorated sheriff's deputy, known in his small Florida town for his sharp uniform, commanding presence, and the respect that came with his badge. To outsiders, he was steady, disciplined, and the very picture of authority. But behind the uniform was a man carrying secrets he guarded with his life. Those who knew him personally would sometimes describe him as charming one moment and unpredictable the next. He had a way of controlling every conversation, always keeping the upper hand. And for someone in law enforcement, that control wasn't just a job requirement. It was part of his nature. He had a history that few people dared to question. Failed relationships, rumors of a short temper, and whispers of things that didn't quite add up. Yet because he wore the badge, because he had the look of a man in charge, people often ignored the warning signs. They assumed he was trustworthy, someone who lived to serve and protect. But to him, the badge was more than a job. It was a shield. It kept people from digging too deep, from asking questions he didn't want to answer. And when she came into his life, bright-eyed and full of faith, she was walking straight into the storm that badge was hiding. He promised her love, safety, and a future. But the truth? He was terrified of the one thing she would eventually discover, and when she did, it would cost her everything. She arrived in Florida on a warm afternoon, exhausted from the long ride but excited to finally meet the man she had been telling her friends about. As she stepped off the bus, there he was, standing tall in his sheriff's uniform, polished boots, and an expression that looked both proud and unreadable. To her, it felt like stepping into a movie. She was swept away by the thought that this man was hers. At first, everything seemed perfect. He carried her bag, opened the car door, and spoke softly as they drove through the city. But beneath the surface, little things began to feel off. His silence stretched longer than it should have. His eyes lingered on her, not with affection, but with something sharper, colder. The house he brought her to was neat, almost too neat. His badge hung by the door, framed photos lined the walls, and everything was in its place. But the quiet inside was unsettling. There was no warmth, no laughter, no sign of a home where love lived, only control. She brushed off the unease, telling herself it was nerves. After all, this was her first time traveling alone, her first time staying with him. But as the night crept in, she noticed his questions. Probing questions, personal questions, questions that made her wonder if he was testing her, waiting to catch her in a lie. What she didn't realize was that she was stepping deeper and deeper into a trap, one where every move she made, every word she spoke, was being measured against a secret he could no longer afford to keep. By the next morning, the excitement that carried her into Florida began to fade. Something about him didn't feel right anymore. The way he moved around the house, the way he avoided direct answers to her questions, it gnawed at her. She wasn't naive, and she had learned to trust her instincts, and her instincts were screaming. It happened when he stepped into the shower. She was alone in his bedroom, and curiosity got the best of her. She noticed a drawer slightly open, something tucked inside that didn't match the sharp, disciplined image he always projected. She pulled it open further, and what she found made her freeze. There were documents, photographs, and personal items that told a story he had never shared with her. But most of all, it was the piece of truth about him that would shatter everything she believed. She realized in that moment that the man she thought was her savior was living a double life. When he came back, dripping water across the floor, she tried to act normal. But he could sense the shift in her eyes, the fear she couldn't hide. For a man like him, control wasn't just about keeping his life in order. It was about making sure no one ever discovered who he really was. She had uncovered too much. And in that moment, he knew he had a choice. Let her leave with the truth, or silence her forever. And tragically, we already know which choice he made. She couldn't hold it in any longer. The questions burned inside her until they finally spilled out. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" she asked, her voice trembling but steady enough to demand an answer. For a split second, he said nothing. He just stared at her, eyes narrowed, jaw tight. Then came a small, forced smile, the kind that was meant to calm, but instead chilled her to the bone. "You don't understand," he whispered. "I was going to tell you, but not like this." She pressed harder. She wanted answers, she deserved them. But with every word she spoke, she saw his patience thinning. His calm tone gave way to sharpness. His shoulders squared. His voice rose. He wasn't the man she thought she knew anymore. He was a stranger, a predator cornered by the truth. The argument grew louder, spilling through the walls of the house. She told him she couldn't stay, that she wanted to leave, that this wasn't what she signed up for. Those words were the spark that lit the fire inside him. His eyes darkened, his hand tightened into a fist, and for the first time, she realized she was trapped. In that moment, love, trust, and hope were gone. What stood before her wasn't a man desperate to fix a mistake. It was someone desperate to protect a secret, no matter the cost. And she had just become the greatest threat to his carefully crafted life. The confrontation turned deadly in a matter of moments. What began as shouting turned into silence, an eerie, suffocating silence that filled the room. She tried to move toward the door, but he stepped in front of her, blocking her path. His voice dropped, cold and controlled. "You're not going anywhere." Her heart raced as panic set in. She reached for her phone, but he snatched it away before she could even dial. Now she was cut off, trapped in a house with a man who wore a badge by day but was showing her a darkness no one else had ever seen. Neighbors later said they thought they heard something that sounded like furniture tipping over, maybe even muffled cries. But no one came to check. No one stepped forward. Behind those walls, the sheriff who had promised her safety made the choice that sealed her fate. He wasn't thinking about love anymore. He wasn't thinking about the future they had dreamed about in their late-night calls. In that moment, his only thought was control, destroying the one person who now knew the truth about him. And by the time the struggle ended, she was gone. The hope-filled girl who traveled to Florida for love was silenced within 24 hours of stepping into his world. Her story, her laughter, her dreams, all erased by the very man she trusted to protect them. When it was over, the house was silent. Too silent. He stood there, breathing heavily, staring at what he had done. For a man trained to handle chaos, to keep order, he was now standing in the middle of his own destruction. But instead of breaking down, he shifted into something else. Survival mode. He knew exactly what a crime scene looked like. He knew what investigators would search for, how evidence could tie him to the truth. And so, he began to move with methodical precision, erasing every trace he could. He cleaned, he rearranged, and he disposed of anything that could tell the story of what had just happened. Hours slipped by. He crafted an alibi, sending messages from her phone to make it seem like she was still alive. To anyone looking in from the outside, it was just another day. A sheriff doing his duty, a woman settling into her new trip. But inside those walls, a body was hidden, and the truth was buried beneath layers of lies. The chilling part? He believed he could get away with it. He thought his badge, his reputation, and his calculated cover-up would shield him from suspicion. After all, who would dare question a man of the law? But no matter how carefully he tried to erase what he had done, one thing remained: the undeniable weight of guilt. And guilt, as we know, always finds a way to surface. At first, no one suspected a thing. She was supposed to be in Florida, enjoying time with her new boyfriend. When her family didn't hear from her, they assumed she was busy. But hours turned into days, and that silence became unbearable. They called, they texted, but the responses felt strange, short, robotic, nothing like her usual warmth. Deep down, they knew something was wrong. When the missing person report was filed, the case immediately took on a strange complexity. The man she had traveled to see wasn't just anyone. He was a sheriff's deputy, a lawman, and questioning one of their own was a delicate matter. Still, detectives had a duty. They started asking questions, and quickly, cracks began to show. His story didn't add up. He claimed she left the house after an argument, but neighbors hadn't seen her go. Surveillance cameras in the area caught nothing, and when investigators pressed him further, his composure began to falter. For a man trained to control situations, he was slipping. The turning point came when digital forensics revealed that her phone had been used hours after she was believed to be alive. Messages sent from his home's Wi-Fi. What he thought was clever cover-up had become the very rope tightening around his neck. Slowly but surely, the image of a respected sheriff crumbled. Behind the badge was not a protector, but a suspect. And soon the truth of what happened inside that Florida house would come crashing into the light. In the end, the truth couldn't stay hidden. His uniform, his badge, his carefully crafted image, it all came crashing down. The man sworn to uphold the law became the very criminal he once claimed to protect others from. And the young woman who believed in him, who traveled for love, became another name in the long list of lives stolen by betrayal and violence. Her story is more than just a tragedy. It's a warning. A reminder that appearances deceive, that trust can be dangerous in the wrong hands, and that sometimes the person you think will protect you is the one you should fear most. If you've watched this far, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you're watching this from. I read your comments, and it means a lot knowing how many of you are part of this community. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Dark Motives. New stories drop every day, stories that force us to ask tough questions and confront the darkest sides of human nature. Hit the notification bell, because the next case might be even more chilling than this one. Until then, stay safe, stay alert, and remember, not every uniform, not every smile is what it seems.